There's been a lot of discussion and debate recently about how news outlets have handled and covered the recent allegation against Joe Biden by Tara Reade, a woman who briefly worked as a staff assistant in Biden's Senate office. We're going to get to what she alleges he did to her back in 1993 in a moment. But first, let's talk about the criticism by some, particularly on the right, that the media has not applied the same standard to this allegation against Biden as it did the allegations against Judge Brett Kavanaugh when he was undergoing his confirmation process. We think that's a good thing. The media should not apply what seemed to be a Kavanaugh standard to Joe Biden. The media should not apply the same standard most applied to Judge Kavanaugh to Donald Trump. The media should not apply a Kavanaugh standard to any public figure. The blanket and absolute standard of simply believing all women is a notion we dismissed here on the show early on. The standard for the media in covering sexual assault allegations needs to be to report the facts, listen to the accuser, and give the accused full due process, both men and women. We were very clear about that on the show during the Kavanaugh story.
On cable news shows, you heard yesterday, experts opining, basically calling Kavanaugh everything but an attempted rapist. We should all sit back. We should wait. Many over the weekend on cable news convicted Brett Kavanaugh of attempted rape, and even some calling him a serial sexual predator, when in fact none of us know what happened.
It's not just Twitter, it's the media that's in a very serious position right now. And if you watch, 24-hour coverage of this story, you may see 4 or 5 analysts in a row being brought on to convict Judge Kavanaugh. There's a need for balance here, because the more that you put one side on, or if you have a focus group with Republican operatives in it, pushing the other side of the story, there are allegations here. They are not proven. There is the law, and there is a push for an investigation. These are the parts that we need to report. But if we're not careful, if the media as a whole is not careful covering this story, we're feeding into that very negative narrative that President Trump himself really drums up in his base, and that is fake news. This 3-hour block of time is a smear-free zone. If there will be no convicting of either person on either side on this show, and honestly, if there's smearing of Dr. Ford or Ms. Ramirez or Brett Kavanaugh on this show, you will be kicked off this set, because we're not doing that.
What we've seen the last week has made me want
all across the board
to call networks and put a D in front of the name of the so-called journalists that have already decided that Brett Kavanaugh is a rapist, or what was the serial sexual abuse. Oh, really? You know that? Do you really know that?
I feel like a lot of people are kind of going out on a limb and convicting Brett Kavanaugh or smearing the accusers, and it's happening in the media, and it's a struggle. I feel like in the media especially, we have two camps. Some who say it has to be believed, and that's where you begin, and others who just want to report the story to see what's going to happen. I was extremely sad for politics and for the media throughout the day yesterday.
Well, it was the bias, actually. If you could not watch both of these human beings suffering the way they were suffering and not feel empathy for them, then you were so biased and you were so sold into your political side, and you so determined what you were going to believe. Then
but the reaction
shouldn't be reported.
I hear what
there are a lot of Americans who are clearly concerned about what Judge Kavanaugh may have done to Dr. Ford, and we're listening to Dr. Ford's testimony a week ago. And in the interim, since then, what we've gotten is stories about Judge Kavanaugh maybe throwing ice cubes in 1985, and other stories like this that look to a lot of Americans, particularly Republicans, but I think even Democrats, like piling on and trying to take the man down.
I thought last week the untold story was just how biased, top to bottom, the press was on reporting this story. Mika also expressed real concerns about political commentators going on networks and calling Brett Kavanaugh a rapist. Columnists, respected columnists, calling him a serial sexual predator. And there didn't seem to be the pushback that there should have been from network executives, from opinion page editors.
During Kavanaugh, and sometimes when you have scandal after scandal after scandal pile on top of each other, that journalistic standard is just brushed aside and ignored. It's just run over. Right. I mean, we can look back, and I hope somebody at a journalism school looks back at what happened during the Kavanaugh hearings and the low standards that a lot of journalists held themselves to and editors held themselves to, and what was published in a rush while the hearings were going on. There's a reason why the FBI needed more time to investigate, because, quite frankly, a lot of journalists put a lot of garbage out there.
We were very strong about this, obviously, and honestly, very few others were.